According to American Wire News, Kayla Lemieux, the biological high school teacher who became famous for strutting around school dressed as a woman with Z-size prosthetic breasts, has now been placed on leave from Oakville Trafalgar High School. Now, you might say to yourself, well, isn't that a good thing? Why is that a tragic story? I mean, after all, this is a male who was walking around with fake prosthetic breasts that were size Z. They were obviously ridiculous, with like fake nipples poking out through the shirt. Why is that person teaching children? Well, it turns out the reason this person has been suspended is not because he was wearing giant Z-size prosthetic breasts at school in front of high school students. No, the reason this person was suspended is because he wasn't wearing the Z-size prosthetic breasts outside of school. I'm not kidding. The development comes roughly 2 weeks after the New York Post discovered Lemieux allegedly dresses like a regular dude outside of work. The discovery was made by simply following him after he left work. The Post reported the teacher, who until a few years ago went by the name Carrie, left Ontario's Oakville Trafalgar High School this week wearing gigantic breasts, a blonde wig, and glasses. It wasn't long until the cartoonish clothing came off. After shopping at a department store and pet supplies shop dressed as a woman, Lemieux headed home to get changed and emerged dressed as a man 30 minutes later. Lemieux then spent the afternoon in public wearing men's sweatpants, trainers, a gray t-shirt, and a navy puffer vest without breast makeup, glasses, or a wig. The Post then obtained witness testimony from Lemieux's neighbors. Quote, he wears prosthetic breasts extremely infrequently. He put the breasts on to teach, occasionally when he goes for a walk or when the cops visit, said one neighbor. According to the neighbor, the prosthetic breasts appeared out of nowhere last May when Lemieux was spotted parading them around while walking down a busy road. I was driving past. You can see the breasts from so far away when you're driving. He puts the whole outfit on, just walked up and down Gulf Line. No bags, just walking. Everyone slows down because you can't believe what you're seeing. Following the Post's investigation, Lemieux contacted them to tell them his side of the story, which was that his obviously fake breasts were somehow real. He said, I'm not wearing prosthetic breasts. These are real. He also denied being transgender, claiming instead to be intersex. He said, my condition is classified as gigantomastia, which can also be referred to as macromastia or breast hypertrophy. It's rare, there's no doubt about it. It affects women on a very rare basis. In my case, I believe, my doctor thinks, because I have XX chromosomes as well, that has something to do with it, and hormone sensitivity to estrogen has caused it, even though these are obviously prosthetic breasts. He said, this is who I am. This is how I look. You've been talking to people in my building. What they're telling you is not the truth. It's not the truth. It wasn't me. He said, I'm always going out looking the way that I am. So, in other words, it was totally fine for this person to make a mockery of the classroom in the most bizarre, fetishistic way. That was fine. The moment that he wasn't doing it like the rest of his life, that's when, I guess it's not authentic. If it's not authentic, then we can't. But if it were authentic, if this dude were wearing around the fake prosthetic breast full time, well, then it's a civil rights issue. Yes, that's how backwards we as a society have become. It is worse for you not to wear the fake prosthetic breasts around the rest of your life than it is for you to wear them in school among high school children. Slow clap for the Canadian system. Okay, other things that I like. So, Bill Maher did an interview with Jake Tapper the other night. Bill Maher's show now appears on CNN because CNN is dying in the ratings, and Maher actually draws flies. And Bill, I'm friendly with Bill. He did a very good interview with Jake Tapper in which he discussed what it's like to actually do his job. He says when he's trying to hire writers for the writer's room, he has a real problem because everybody is ideologically monolithic.
So every year I read these packets of proposed writers, and I read them this year as I do every year, and it's just stunning how uniform their points of view are.
And it hasn't always been that way.
I don't remember, but I don't think it was ever quite this bad. It's the exact same point of view on every single issue, and it's very predictable. I have a relationship with people who want to hear what I think is the truth, and I'm going to present both sides.
Maher also pointed out that the woke left, well, they love diversity, but they don't like diversity of ideas very much.
So you talk about the Democrats being so hemmed in by identity politics. The counter argument would be, it's always been identity politics. It's just always been white people, so people like you and me didn't notice. And now it's just an effort at inclusion, which I'm sure theoretically you support.
Yeah, I support it in fact. But, I mean, the Democrats sometimes can take it too far. Or, I would categorize liberal as different than woke. Woke, which started out as a good thing, alert to injustice, who could be against that. But it became sort of an eye roll because they love diversity except of ideas. And that's not really where we should be. I mean, they have a trail of very bad ideas.
Yes, they do. Well, as Bill Maher says, it's hard to get the truth out there these days, but here is a truth. The federal government, they are not good at running the economy, which is why we are running inflation rates 3 times what they are supposed to be. Well, if you don't trust the federal government to run the economy, one way that you can diversify away from their control is to actually take some of your money and put it into precious metals. I've done that with my friends over at Birch Gold. Hedge against inflation by owning gold, whether that's physical gold and silver in your safe at home or through an IRA in precious metals, where you can hold real gold and silver in a tax-sheltered retirement account. I bought gold from Birch Gold because, again, diversification is a smart strategy. Buy gold today, get a free safe to store it in. That is correct. On qualifying purchases from Birch Gold Group now through March 31st, they will ship a free safe directly to your door. Just text Ben to 989898, get your free info kit on gold, claim eligibility for your free safe, and then talk to one of their precious metals specialists. That's Ben to 989898 today. Again, text Ben to 989898, get your free info kit on gold, ask all of your questions, get all of them answered. When you feel comfortable, then buy some gold, claim eligibility for that free safe. That's Ben to 989898 today. Diversify. It is a smart investment strategy. Text Ben to 989898. Get in touch with my friends at Birch Gold. Well, I don't think that Canadian guy actually has a medical condition. He may have a mental condition, but I don't think that he has like a medical condition. But if you do, or if you're worried that you might have, and that supply chains, when they break, they're not going to get you the antibiotics you need in time, for example, you need Jace Medical. This is what I did. I ordered the Jace case. Why? Well, I don't want to have to worry about having emergency medications in case, God forbid, there's some sort of emergency. It's a pack of 5 different antibiotics you can use to treat a host of bacterial illnesses in an emergency. Get your Jace emergency medications right now. The vast majority of vital medications will be very hard to get if the supply chain gets any worse. I mean, you remember, it was really bad during COVID. Well, given the sort of bizarre nature of the international scene right now, given the possibilities of natural disasters, the reality is you got to have stuff in your house in case things go wrong. Visit jacemedical.com, take a few minutes, fill out their online form. Your information is then reviewed by a board-certified physician. Your medication is dispensed by a licensed pharmacy at a fraction of the regular cost. Enter code Ben at checkout for a discount on your order. That's at jasemedical.com, promo code Ben. Again, jasemedical.com, promo code Ben. It is the smart thing to do. I have kids, so I'm always concerned about making sure we have the medication we need in the house in case of emergency, God forbid. Do the easy thing. Head on over to jacemedical.com, promo code Ben at checkout for a discount on your order. Bill Maher, it's amazing. Remember, if you go back to my first book that I wrote in like 2003 when I was still in college, if you go back and you look at that book, I talk about Bill Maher. I'm pretty disparaging about Bill Maher because he and I were on opposite sides of every single issue. Well, Bill Maher is no longer on the opposite sides of every issue. It's just that the entire political spectrum has moved so far to the left that him being mildly reasonable now makes him a right-winger in the eyes of the left. Pretty amazing stuff. Okay, time for some things that I hate. So the situation over in Israel domestically is incredibly stupid right now. I say it's incredibly stupid because you're seeing hundreds of thousands of people who are going into the streets to protest an overhaul of the judiciary. Now, in reality, they're not protesting the overhaul of the judiciary. The people who are in the streets right now and who are very angry are really just angry that Benjamin Netanyahu and the right wing won the last election cycle. After a series of sort of stalemate elections, Netanyahu won an overwhelming victory in the last election. He got 64 seats in the 120-seat parliament. And one of the first things that he took on was an obvious flaw in the Israeli governmental system, which is the judiciary. The judiciary in Israel is very weird. Essentially, the people who are on the Supreme Court of Israel can make rulings striking down legislation, not on the basis of a constitution, because there is no constitution in Israel. They just basically say they don't like a thing and strike it down, which means that they're not actually a judiciary. They're just a super legislature. They appoint their own successors, effectively speaking. The legislature is not really involved. The prime minister is not really involved. Like it's an outside body that selects the people who can actually be the justices on the Israeli Supreme Court, and that includes past Supreme Court justices and members of the Israeli Bar Association and all the rest. It doesn't work like the United States does. In the United States, it works pretty rationally. The president selects a justice. The Senate has the power of advice and consent, and then votes on the Supreme Court justice. The justices are then bound to uphold a written constitution in the face of other legislation, and the Constitution overrules. There is no constitution in Israel, and the judicial branch is basically impervious to any sort of public input in the form of, say, the prime minister selecting the justices who are going to be on the Supreme Court and then the parliament being able to up or down it. Okay, so Netanyahu came in and he said, I've looked at the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court has been a stalwart instrument for the hard left in Israel for literally the entirety of Israel's existence. And so he wanted to pass a rule, some laws that would change how the Supreme Court was run in Israel. And here are effectively what the changes are. There are essentially 4. One was the Knesset, the parliament, would be allowed to override Supreme Court decisions by majority vote. Okay, well, that makes sense if the court is not speaking on behalf of a constitution on behalf of a higher law. Right? All that's saying is that the legislature in Israel rules, which makes sense unless there's going to be, again, another higher document that the Supreme Court can use to strike down legislation. You have to have some sort of basis for striking things down. Second, the changes would have removed the Supreme Court's ability to judge Knesset legislation for reasonability. This is one of the standards they were using, and they weren't judging it against the Constitution. They were saying, is it reasonable? Reasonability. Well, that's not a judicial category, reasonability. If a legislature passes a law, it is not up to the judiciary to decide whether the law was quote unquote reasonable. It's up to them to decide whether it conflicts with some sort of higher law. Reasonability, as it turns out, for the leftist members of the Israeli Supreme Court just meant anything we don't like, we'll strike down. So that's a problem. So they're going to change that. It was also going to give the most control over appointing judges to the ruling coalition rather than to the legal experts and representatives who are sort of this independent body. So it's going to look more like the American system than it looks right now. And finally, one of the weird things in Israel is that every department in the Israeli executive branch has its own legal advisors. Okay, but those legal advisors don't give advice to the heads of those branches. They literally just strike down legislation inside the department. So imagine if Joe Biden went to his EPA and he said, I want you to do X. And the head of the EPA is like, okay, I'm going to implement that. And there's a legal advisor inside the EPA who just say, nope, you can't do it. You can't. Sorry, you can't. Well, I mean, you weren't elected. You're a bureaucrat. That is not how that works. So what this would have done is it would have allowed the legal advisors to be advisors as opposed to, sort of independent judicial bodies who are striking down regulations and legislation inside the executive branch. Those were the changes. None of those seem wildly earth-shattering. There might be some wiggle room in terms of negotiation on these things. You could see that. And that's probably what's going to end up happening in Israel because the simple fact is the Supreme Court of Israel is going to strike down any law that doesn't get made via negotiation here. And they have sort of a catch-22. They want to pass a law changing the nature of the judiciary, but the judiciary still has the ability to strike down the law changing the nature of the judiciary. Because again, when you don't have a constitution, in the United States, this isn't a problem. In the United States, when you want to change the constitution, you make an amendment. The amendment prohibits the judiciary from speaking on a particular topic. Israel doesn't have a constitution, so there's no way for them to quote-unquote overrule the judiciary. The judiciary basically gets to decide what the judiciary gets to do, which is part of the problem. Alrighty, guys, the rest of the show is continuing right now. You're not going to want to miss it. We'll be getting into the question of why Sesame Street is featuring guests who really should not be around the kiddies, I think. If you're not a member, become a member. Use code Shapiro at checkout for 2 months free on all annual plans. Click the link in the description and join us.